BSI, that's British Standards Institute, and the IEEE, and maybe some of the things in NASA America. So how do we resolve a conflict between standards organizations? Well, you get something that's a bigger community is what the answer. So, in a lot of the standards that we did have, they weren't complete. Hence the interest, starting about 5 years ago, to come up with kind of a more comprehensive standard that addresses things in a more complete fashion. It will, as I keep saying, continue to evolve and change over time as the industry evolves and changes over time. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The areas that we've started to address now, we'll cover these: organization, test project management. We've got things on unit level, what are known as structural testing that now is in there, as well as the black box functional kind of testing that probably a lot of you do. We've got part 2 on general processes that includes everything from test strategy to risk-based, down to test execution and test reporting. And we'll step through all these things. And we've also got some things on what's known as non-functional testing. Non-functional testing includes things like performance testing. Anybody doing performance testing? Know what I'm talking about in performance testing? Performance testing is one of those things which you probably all experienced. Anybody ever try and log on a web page and not have it load? Chances are, it could be other things, but one of the big things that we know in the web world is whole bunches of people are trying to access that web page at the same time. The server on the website doesn't have enough bandwidth to support that. That's a performance problem. And we know that's an issue because we see it all the time. Those are the kinds of non-functional tests that we need to be thinking. Anybody worrying about security in software? Somebody raise your hand. Security scares me. That's one of the areas that I've been learning about. Why? Because it's a non-functional area, so the functions can be working, but if you have a hole in your software, that's how the bad guys get in and do bad things. Anybody ever had a virus on their computer? Yeah, most of us have. My boss over here, she's also my system administrator and configuration management person. How often do you run security scans on our software? Almost daily. Probably not enough, right? Another kind of non-functional testing. So the standard has a little bit on that kind of non-functional testing. So it's more than just testing the requirements. So here's the structure I was kind of outlining earlier. You have ISO up here. You have the information technology area. You have the systems and software engineering area. So this is drilling down to the ISO organization. SC7, Subcommittee 7, Systems and Software. Down here was Working Group 26. That was the group that has produced the standard. 4 parts, 20-some countries, with a lot of representatives from countries like Malaysia and Japan. I will tell you it was a very interesting experience for me and the convener as the leaders of this kind of thing, trying to reach what's known as consensus agreement among 20 experts. It was very interesting, took a lot of discussion on how to do that over many meetings and many late nights, I think, too. So the project editor, that's me. I have responsibilities going up in the organization along with Stuart Reed. I also talked with the IEEE people because they were another sponsoring organization. So I had things coming from above. I had things coming from here to get something that's a workable standard that's going to, say, continue to change and affect the world of testing. So, another roadmap picture here. Part 1, it's at the top. It is introductory, it is definitions, it sets the stage. We'll see as we go through this, I'm going to focus on part 1, but I will tell you right now, and a couple of the questions of how do we use this thing and how do we comply with it. Part 1 has no real shall statement. Okay? It means there's no conformance information in there. Kind of does because you have to have the definitions to understand conformance statements, but part 1 is not really a conformance section, but you do have to kind of set the stage for it. Part 1, we brought in some other ISO standards. This is the systems engineering standard, how you write requirements. This is the software standard. Looks like something got cut off there. I think this is a BSI standard. But these standards have to be reflected into 29119, meaning there's synergy. So, for example, the systems engineering standard and the software engineering standard says do testing. It's a good thing. They don't tell you the details of how to do software testing. They just say, do software testing, do software verification, do software validation. So you have to have the lower level standard to do that. So these things drive into part 1, which drives to these other standards. There was also the BSI standard. The red things here mean that we reused information, which kind of goes to the question of how mature is this? Well, we used existing standards. So while I say it's 29119 is new and in infancy, it inherited essentially parents' standards that have been around for a long time. So SA2013-D1-T7 has been around. ISO29119, as Lee Copeland said, has been around since the early 80s. You'll see the heritage here of these parts. So it's not totally immature. Okay? It's got some good lineage, some good heritage and historic standards. As I said, I know IEEE 829 and IEEE 108, at least from the IEEE standpoint, we're going to sunset this. Somewhere in the next few years, there'll be an announcement that says they're going away, meaning they're not going to be maintained in probably 5 years or so. They won't be there in the IEEE library. So these things provide the heritage, but then they're going to go away. Part 2 is processes. We will look through the processes in detail. It's driven out of part 1 and reflected in part 1. Part 2 calls out doing techniques, software test techniques. They are defined in part 4. Software test technique is something like boundary value analysis. If you haven't heard of that, you can now go to part 4, once it comes out here in a few months, and see the definition of boundary value analysis. You can also go get Lee Copeland's most excellent book, by the way. He kind of showed that book. But that's like my favorite book on software test design right now that Lee put up. It's very easy to understand. Lee Copeland's book defines that technique in a lot more, let's say, user-friendly fashion than part 4. Because part 4 is, by design, is kind of the bare bones, the kind of thing a researcher could use with a little bit of explanation. Lee Copeland's book is a much more user-friendly version. So we're not looking to replace anybody's book or class in this thing. We're looking for definition. Part 3 is the documentation, as I said, 9. So it defines something like the outline, the content of a software test plan. It would be tailored, as Lee Copeland was saying. You probably would want to have a plan. It might look different than this with some tailoring. That's okay. We allow it. There will be, for those of you in the company world, there will be an ISO standard 33063, and I forget the sub number underneath that, that will allow a company saying we follow ISO 29119 to be assessed. It's known as an assessment. Anybody familiar with CMI? Capabilities Maturity Model Integrated, where we do assessments on those kinds of things. ISO will provide an assessment model for companies looking to get assessed or accredited against ISO 29119. So there will be an assessment model produced that reflects these parts up here. Why would a company want to do an assessment? One, to improve, but also potentially to be able to say another company looking to hire you, we've done the work, we've done our homework, we've got some good activities. Therefore, we're better than a company that maybe hasn't done something. And I say me. For people that ask questions about what do buyers and contractors do, I still would say you would probably want to do an evaluation as a buyer. Figure out what's really right for me. Because as Lee Copeland is fond of saying, there's no one size fits all. And how you might work in a regulated environment with the FDA would be different than maybe somebody producing a game for a smartphone. And by the way, I used to make fun of gamers on what software testing they did. I had them in some classes, and they said, no, you don't understand. Testing in the game industry is probably more important, not from a regulated sense, but if the game doesn't work, they go out of business. So even the gaming industry, people producing software games for the smartphone, recognize the advantage of testing. And I mentioned there's a fifth part. I don't draw any arrows to it yet because it's just in its beginning stages of being production, but keyword-driven testing, which incorporates a little bit from the automation world and a little bit from the model world, and concepts like that is just being started up here this year, and we'll see where it goes. It's too young for me to even tell you where the voting on how to fit. These parts, those four there, are pretty well so, some discussion, a little exercise here. We've had a couple of really good questions. How do you think you should use a standard? Somebody put a picture. How do you think you should use a standard? And where you're at, what you do. eBay. Am I going to have to pick on somebody? I had to pick on somebody. Go. Speak loud. How do you think you should use it? For what? Certification of the company. Of the product. Okay. You could probably do it. Yes. And I would probably not use the word certification because that has, in certain countries, a legal meaning. I would probably prefer the word assessment because it has a different That was there we go. That's this.
That's for processes. How about the process?
Okay, now I know. So the assessment model is going to be produced by ISO based upon the standard. And what was the question?
So you're saying that process assessment is for the product side, the assessment of the product, or is it?
I think you can use it for both. It'll be an assessment model, so you could use it on the product. You probably more likely do it on the organization side. And then on the product side, I would probably do it in the form of an assessment against that particular contract. So if you'd called out these parts of ISO, I would say a tester or a QA person would have to come along and Right, provide evidence. That's the important word, by the way. When we do assessments, is you provide evidence. Say, like, if I say I'm going to do a test plan, and the evidence would be, here's the test plan.